Welcome to #HealMeToo at home with insights, art, and activism to meet the needs of now. I'm Hope Singson, the artist, activist, survivor, and founder of the HealMeToo Festival and podcast. If you're listening on Apple or any podcast, you might want to check out the YouTube channel for the HealMeToo podcast and festival, where you can watch the video of this interview and every recent episode. In the HealMeToo at Home series, I'm talking to advocates and healing practitioners about all the different traumas that survivors in our communities are experiencing right now, with a special focus on stories you may not be hearing about and ideas, tools, and actions that may help. Subscribe to the HealMeToo podcast today on YouTube and Apple or anywhere you get podcasts. And follow us at HealMeTooFest on social media to hear about every new episode and every live event we start offering on Zoom. A quick note about today: we won't focus on graphic details, but I do encourage you to take a break or skip ahead anytime you need. And you can find a list of support resources at HealMeTooPodcast.com. At live HealMeToo events, we always start with community agreements, and I'm starting every episode with one of them. It's called Ouch, Oops, Oh, or the 3 O's. I offer this tool because I am a white, cis, middle-class, queer interviewer. I work passionately for social justice in my activist group and through this platform, but of course I make mistakes. So if I say or do anything that causes discomfort or hurt, I truly hope podcast listeners and my guests will feel invited to say ouch so I can say oops, and then listen in the spirit of oh so I can learn to do better. If we're lucky, we won't have any major Zoom glitches, but if we do, I hope you'll be patient. Now, I'm really happy to welcome social worker and relationship abuse prevention program, aka RAP, coordinator, Ashleigh Anderson of Day One, a nonprofit that partners with youth to end dating abuse and domestic violence through community education, supportive services, and legal advocacy. As a RAP coordinator, Ashleigh works in New York City's Edward R. Murrow High School to provide trauma-informed counseling, educational workshops for students, parents, and staff, and a peer leadership program that promotes healthy relationships in the school community. In the summer months, Ashleigh facilitates a peer leadership training program for teens to gain the knowledge and skills to be supportive peers and agents of social change in the movement to end intimate partner violence. She previously worked as the intervention coordinator at the NYC Alliance Against Sexual Assault and as a case manager at a domestic violence shelter. Her intervention and prevention advocacy is informed by a strength-based, anti-oppression, and intersectional approach. Welcome to you, Ashleigh Anderson.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. So when we first met, it was because I was looking for people who work with young folks, whether that would be children, middle schoolers, or high schoolers, to talk about any aspects, of what's happening right now for young people, because whether they are survivors or not, every young person is, as we all know, going through so much right now. And for survivors, it would be especially difficult, I would assume. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so I would love to, actually, I remember when I first asked you, like, what stories and issues do you think people may not be hearing about? And I brought up the way that we were focused in the early days of shutdown on the spike in domestic violence that was believed to be occurring. I've also since read that the reporting of sexual abuse is way, way, way down, which is concerning because people just aren't, getting the help that they surely need.
Mm-hmm.
But I asked you, what kind of stories, and you mentioned that yes, violence has increased, but that it can be different for young people. So I wanted to maybe ask you to expand on that for the listeners.
Yeah, so I know we had touched upon tech abuse and how you've talked about that in a previous episode. And that is absolutely, I would say, one of probably the biggest form of abuse that I'm seeing happening with young people currently. Tech abuse, like many different forms of abuse, is, using force, threat, coercion, or manipulation as a form of power and control. But I think with technology, it's so far reaching. It's always there. We always have our phones in our hands. We're always using technology. And I think now more than ever, it's really like our lifeline in so many ways. But along with that, it is also a way of accessing people all of the time. And so as that relates to tech abuse or a connection to intimate partner violence or unhealthy characteristics or aspects in any relationship or friendship with young people, is that there's an expectation of availability that I'm seeing a lot of right now. That, young people's way of communicating, as with most people, is texting, FaceTime, Zoom, all these different things. And so for most of us, we're just at home, right? We're quarantining and doing the best we can and working from home.
Yeah.
Right. And so since we know that that is the case for most of us, there's a lot more like, if you don't answer a text, you don't answer a phone call, you don't answer a FaceTime, whatever it is, then there is this like, why aren't you answering? You're not doing anything else. And so that kind of is like leading into these different boundaries that are not being respected, or new conversations around like how needs can be met, or how this is or is not feeling good to young people, which are tricky conversations to have at any point in your life. But especially as a young person, when it's, you're just starting to figure out what boundaries are comfortable for you, what your needs are, how you want them to be met, all of those things. I think it's kind of, a new, like it's all being kind of like thrown at them in this different way, and having these conversations that maybe haven't been had before.
Right. Like if you were already on that journey of how do I negotiate what I need or my boundaries in real life and in regular life, now I've got to actually adjust all of that to a completely different pattern of living. And as you're saying, one where there's not as much, it's odd because we're in our private homes, but yet in a sense we have less privacy because I guess that private boundary has been crossed. There is no, we're so used to looking into each other's homes on Zoom as if it was the most normal thing. And before shutdown, that would not have been something everybody allowed, I'm always like, wow, she's taking that call from her bed.
Right. Like, yeah, this is my bedroom. I mean,
Right.
when I was running the summer program just a few weeks ago, like students were like in my bedroom, right? Like
We would not do that normally.
no.
And by the way, I didn't mean you. I didn't know that you were in your bedroom.
No.
Didn't perceive you as being on your bed. But actually, there was someone during the Democratic convention. There was like a congressional staffer, and I'm like, that's her headboard. Like it's a nice room and everything, but oh my God, that's so weird.
Right.
So anyway, I digress. I think your point is really excellent. So one of the other questions that I asked you is if you just had a platform, like for instance this one, to speak directly to teens and or parents, would you offer any suggestions for navigating these times? Like what would your suggestions be around boundaries?
Yeah. I mean, I think for parents, because my perspective is very much empowering young people, on like wanting young people to be able to have as much of a voice and as much of a say in everything that they do. I think what I would say to parents is to be empathetic and continue to just be kind to your children, to your young people that you have in your home. I think that from the conversations that I've just heard in my daily life from different adults, parents, that they've, I mean, obviously it's mixed, but I've heard like, oh, they've been on vacation since March. Like these kids have been on vacation for the last like few months, or they've like, had time off, or it really hasn't been as stressful or impactful for them as it really is.
Oh,
Yeah. So, and I can
is that's
understand.
the perspective of parents, you're saying?
Yes, and I think that it varies. I know that
Of
parents,
course.
there's different parents that feel that can, understand that this is a lot for everyone. But that is something that I have heard. And so I think that, um, while it might seem like, oh, young people are just home and like there's a
Hmm.
lot of free time and a lot of,
Watching
yeah,
programs
watching
and playing
whatever.
games or
Right.
whatever they're doing. Yeah.
I think that like if you just think about it for yourself, like I have also had a lot of downtime. I've watched a lot of TV. I've had, many quiet moments in my apartment by myself, but it doesn't mean I'm having a good time and I'm not enjoying this. And it's
Hmm.
the same for young people. Like they miss out on their prom, they miss out on graduation, they have missed out on so many fun parts of high school or whatever grade that you're in. Interacting with your friends, like that is so 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 important as a young
Hmm.
person, building these relationships and um, getting to express yourself in whatever way and having a free space to express yourself, that you might not have at home, even if you have a wonderful home.
Hmm.
So I think for parents, I would just want to like continue to emphasize that and remind them that, um, young people are struggling. It's hard for them too, to just be there for them and supportive and kind, um, and maybe just encouraged to have like more conversations.
Hmm.
Um, and I think for young people, I think this is a really, really great opportunity to be practicing boundaries and to be, um, thinking about healthy relationships in a way of like, is this relationship or friendship serving you? How is it serving you? Um, if it's not, it's okay to reevaluate how you want this relationship to look. It is okay to take time away from your phone or from screens. You are allowed to disconnect. You are allowed to take your own time. You're allowed to be by yourself. You can, have those moments where you just need to kind of check out or disengage, because it's definitely needed. And it's normal. Like before all of this, like that was a normal thing to do. You were able to go to school, be that person, engage with whoever you wanted, and then you got to go home and remove yourself from that situation. And same with home, you got to remove yourself from that situation and go to school, um, and kind of like take time away from
Hmm.
people. So that I continue to encourage that now. If you're at home, if you're going to be doing remote learning or you're not going to be in school full time, um, that's still a very acceptable thing to be doing and a healthy thing to be doing.
Right. Yeah, you're making me think back to when I was a teen and how important those journeys from one identity even into another identity, like my at-home person and then my independent person,
Mm-hmm.
and my, peer group person.
Right.
And how important that like journeying is to forming that sense of myself apart from my family. So I can definitely imagine how challenging it is if you're stuck at home. Um, it's a different type of boundary, I guess, than what you're talking about, which is I need to. It's just the inverse, like needing to be able to close the door when you get home and not always be accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also it makes me wonder about like the need for privacy at home so that there is any space that is your own that's not, you know, just in your family sphere. But
Right, which is especially hard in New York City, where
yeah,
most people don't have
space.
space, private space, and
Yeah.
But I think that that also makes me think of like another thing to parents is that young people have so many identities that you probably do not know about because your young person isn't ready to share or for whatever reason. And I think that, you know, for many, many students that I'm working with, many identify as part of the LGBTQI community. And it has been especially tough for young people holding those identities because a lot of them are not out to their parents or are not, you know, aren't having those conversations with their parents. And school was a place for them to be open with their identities and have groups and friends and all of that who know who they are, know how they identify and respect them and care for them. And so, you know, regardless of if it's safe to have that conversation with your parents or you're choosing not to for whatever reason, that is another aspect of young people at home having to, you know, maybe hide parts of themselves, which I know has been very, very true for many students that I've worked with. And so just another thing for parents to be mindful of that you don't know everything and that's okay, but to be thoughtful about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's normal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That teens, you know, are having their private identity as
Right.
well, at
And
least to
they're
some
still like,
extent.
right. And then in a huge part of that could be just because they're still figuring it out and aren't ready to have that conversation yet until they have, you know, a better idea for themselves.
Right, right. What other guidance for navigating these really tricky times? I know when we were speaking, you mentioned important aspects of self-care.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think self-care, I mean, self-care is said all the time and talked about and um but I don't know. I kind of feel like it's like I love you where it's like said too much and then not enough kind of a thing. Um but I think with self-care, I think really being intentional and thoughtful about your self-care. Self-care doesn't isn't necessarily like, you know, taking a bath or eating cookies or whatever. Like it could be that, but it is about really intentionally taking care of the health of your mental state and your physical state, like mind, body, soul, really taking care of all parts of yourself. And so paying attention to what you're needing and then doing that. So it could be taking a nap, it could be taking a break from school or from work, turning off your phone, putting on your do not disturb, taking a shower, or you know, if that's not like if you just need to lay in bed all day and not take a shower and not change out of your pajamas, that's also self-care, and that's okay. So, you know, whatever it might be, there are so self-care can look so many different ways. And sometimes it's not necessarily like this like fun, glamorous thing. Like I'm saying, like taking a bath or putting on a face mask. Like
It's
sometimes,
not all glamping.
right. Sometimes, like for me, I know that when I go outside and get some sun and some fresh air, I feel so much better. But the act of getting outside, like I do not want to. It is so like, especially now, it fills me with so much anxiety. But I know I will feel better. So
Right.
that is part of my self-care. That it's like it's getting to the other side where I know it will be beneficial to me. Um,
Yeah.
but sometimes the steps of getting there is not like the fun part,
Yeah.
and the activity is not necessarily like I'm not like, you know, it's not so fun to go for a walk. It's nice, but I know that when I get home I feel a lot better.
Right.
And so things like that, it could be, you know, going to the grocery store and like doing little things like those are all a part of self-care.
Mm-hmm.
And so reminding yourself of that and just staying in touch with your needs, I think is really important.
Yeah. No, you're reminding me, you know, like cleaning your room or cleaning your apartment, doing stuff like that. Not at all fun for me, but absolutely connected to self-care because as I let it get messy and unattended, makes me feel really poorly about myself, or it just is a drag on my whole day,
Mhm.
my energy. You're also reminding me that there was a stage when I was dating and I was like, I want to find a partner for whom doing our taxes is self-care. Like, definitely not fun, but really important.
Right.
Another area that I am not always on top of at all. Um, so anyway, I think that's a really great insight about self-care. And it's true that we do, like in social media and popular culture, we do talk about it as baths, and it's just baths and candles and
Yoga.
sachets and yoga, which is wonderful,
Yeah.
but all of those are wonderful, but
Yeah.
yeah. Um, I would love to also touch on this time that we're in, where another of the major stressors is what's happening in the world, and not beyond the pandemic, but police violence and like just the horrific stuff that's happening, the violence by right-wing extremist, what do we even want to use? Terrorists
Mhm.
showing up at protests and um, all of that.
Mhm.
So I would love if you had any suggestions for, self-care around that in particular, because I know that that's got to be really hard for so many young people. I mean, many different feelings, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
Yes. I think just across the board, taking breaks from the news is incredibly important. I have to remind myself of that regularly, because we want to stay informed and want to know what's going on. Um, but it is not helpful for us to be engaged to things like the news or Twitter or however it is you get like current event information. It can be really harmful for us to be on that 24/7. And I think at the beginning of COVID and the beginning of Black Lives Matter movement, like not the beginning, but when it was things were starting in May,
Hmm.
I was on my phone all of the time. And it was really detrimental to my mental health. Like I could definitely see, and like my friends around me, and
Hmm.
and typically our friend groups usually share our similar beliefs, um, much of the time, and so along with that, our social media feeds are flooded with the same information.
Right.
So every time I look on Instagram, every time I look on Facebook, whatever it is, TikTok, like all your algorithms sync with each other and know what you're interested in. And so I was just seeing the same stuff over and over again. And so even the places where I would go for fun, like Instagram is a fun place for me, it really wasn't, there was no sense of relief, because it was like, sign these petitions and look at this video and all those things, which is great because it's good that we're getting the information out there. But at the same time, you know, thinking about, you can disengage from that for moments in time. And that doesn't mean you're any less of an advocate or an activist or a part of the movement, or you're less informed. It doesn't mean any of those things. It just means that you're taking care of yourself, which you've got to do if you want to stay, if you want to be an activist, if you want to be a part of the movement, if you want to be a part of the change, you have to take care of yourself, because or else you're going to get completely burnt out. Um, and then what? So I think that giving yourself time to just like watch silly TV or stare out the window or pet your cat or whatever it is, like do that. I would say that that is probably the biggest thing. And then I think a lot of conversations I was having with young people around activism has been just kind of a struggle of like how to be an activist, and what to do, because their options are limited, especially if there's parents. Parents have say in what their young person is doing. So going to protests and being out on the street and all that is not necessarily an option. And that's fine. There are so many other ways to be an activist. there's been a lot of virtual protests. There's been plenty of petitions to sign. There's been ways to be active on social media, sharing content, educating people around you, having those really tough conversations with friends and family. Like that's all part of activism. So I think that's just another important thing, that there are just like so many different ways to be involved, and whatever way you choose to be involved is great.
Yeah. And I think I run phone banks as a leader of an activist group. And one of the types of phone banking that we've been doing all summer is an organization called Reclaim Our Vote. And it's actually, its mission, it partners with the state chapters of the NAACP in voter suppression states. So, you could sort of, and I know Black Voters Matter is showing up at protests and registering people, but another way that you could participate remotely, actually, if you're willing to take a chance on talking to people on the phone, is to do phone banking with Reclaim Our Vote and reach out to voters of color in voter suppression states and help them have access to the information that they need in order to exercise their right to vote and have it be counted, because there are so many loopholes and crazy rules and things that are designed to make it hard or unsafe, encouraging people to vote early and stuff like that. But anyway, I always like to put in a plug for Reclaim Our Vote because it's just such amazing and important work. And here we are talking about what can you do from home. So
right, that's awesome. And also, like for young people, like if you're not at the age to vote, like your voice matters. Like think of all of the things that you have done, like with TikTok over the last few months. Like you are changing the world.
Oh my God, that prank on Trump was too amazing.
It's so good.
So good. But and imagine how people will react if like it's a young person calling them with voting information. Oh my God, that just makes me want to cry. It's so beautiful, They will definitely go vote.
Yes.
I mean, and I don't think that that's actually the issue. Anyway, I don't mean to make it sound like people don't intend to vote or don't want to vote, because that's really not what it's about. It's really about all the barriers.
Right.
Sometimes those barriers diminish a person's willingness to try again, so that's really the only way that I guess I meant it. But I just think people would really dig hearing from young people.
Definitely.
So anyway, we've both been talking about like the ways that these things impacted us personally, and I can imagine that for somebody working with or raising a teenager in these times, there are challenges for someone in social work or for a parent who has a kid who maybe is showing some signs of trauma, which I don't think we've actually addressed. Like maybe it would be good to even just name some of those, but I'm also wondering, how do you take care of yourself at the same time?
Yeah, like we've spoken about, I think it's such a weird, different experience, what's going on right now, because we're all experiencing trauma at the same time. And, this has happened throughout history, but it's so prolonged, and it's so layered that it feels very different. And so I think that it is especially challenging to be taking care of ourselves and be supporting or taking care of the young people in our lives, because we're all going through it at the same time and all kind of a little bit lost or sad or depressed or anxious, or traumatized, and trying to work through our own feelings, while also showing up for the people around us. And that's really hard because, a lot of times when we are, as parents or as caregivers or as social workers or other people in the field, we might relate to our clients or our children or whatever, but it is further removed from us. So it might be there, it could even be a little bit triggering. It could be, or it could just be like, oh, I totally know what you're talking about. I remember X, Y, and Z, or whatever it is. But right now it's like, we're all going through it at the same time. We're all going through it together. And so I imagine that a lot of people are kind of feeling at a loss. A lot of parents, a lot of caregivers, a lot of service providers are feeling a little like we're all just trying to figure it out.
Right. Not having the answers.
Right. Not having any of the answers. I think it's helpful for service providers. Like we are equipped with tools of, dealing with traumatic experiences, and making sure we are, thinking about self-care and having people in our lives that we are talking to, whether that be our own therapist or family or friends around us. So, I mean, that is really helpful, but it is really challenging. There's a lot of conversations of like, I'm trying to be in a therapy session with a young person, and while I'm asking them how they are, they're also like, how are you? How are you doing? And it's hard because you don't want to be like a fake robotic person and be like, I'm fine, because who is fine right now? But it's also like not about me, it's about you. So that's all that kind of stuff always kind of comes up. But I think it's even harder now because it's like, usually in any other circumstance I can be like, I'm fine and we can move along and it's whatever, but it doesn't really make sense in this situation. Right. And so kind of balancing all of those things. And then on the others, like when it's with parents or caregivers, they don't have that opportunity to create that same kind of separation or barriers. Like, it's not like, I get to meet with them for an hour or 45 minutes. And then, and there's it's a very defined relationship. But I think with parents and caregivers, it's definitely trickier. But it is also a really, really great opportunity to be having conversations. Like, this has opened so many doors to be having conversations about healthcare, politics, racism, oppression, voting rights. Like, there's just so many things that, if they weren't conversations that were being had already in households, then, now is the time. And so I think that, I hope that this encourages that rather than, people kind of shutting down themselves or shutting down conversations, because it definitely helps to talk about things. I mean, that's, my profession wouldn't exist if it wasn't helpful. So talking through things, I think is the way to go.
I have this thought that, I'm not a parent, I'm an aunt, but I have this thought that I'm wondering, does, in a situation where you don't have it worked out for yourself, because it's an influx chronic problem, like it being the pandemic, just for one, all of these things, systemic racism, not going away tomorrow, not like new. So when you're in the middle of something that, as you said, you're living at the same time that this young person is living. And so it's not like you're at a different point in the journey through this experience. You're in it together, or in tandem. Is there something that can be modeled about grace or acceptance, or, as you said, self-care for sure, but tools, like applying one's tools and sharing that process with the young person, just since you can't be like, oh, here's what I learned about dating, or here's what I learned about failing a test, or whatever. Trite example maybe, but
yeah, I think there's a lot of things on the spectrum. I think one is being transparent, that you don't have all the answers and that you're not perfect. I think that especially young people like can sniff out
inauthentic.
Yes. Yeah. So being genuine, and like transparent around that, I think is really, really helpful. and will go a long way, especially with building a relationship. Yeah, so I think that's helpful. I also think that I just completely lost my train of thought. I had like 3 bullet points and then they just went away. Can you repeat your question again?
Oh my goodness, it was long. I know.
Oh wait, no, wait. Okay, I
Go
think I
ahead.
got
Go
it. Okay,
ahead.
so I think another thing is really re reiterating their resilience.
Mm,
Human beings are so resilient, but young people are so incredibly resilient. And I mean, I think that message kind of is tied into all of the work that I do, especially working with with survivors, right? Like there's just a lot of feelings of like this isn't going to get better, or
hmm.
um like I'm not going to get through this. And so,
Yes.
a lot of similar feelings for if you experience um gender-based violence might be similar feelings to what's coming up now, um, which can be PTSD, which, also something that you were saying, like that might be helpful to kind of talk, like look out for signs of. So since we are all experiencing trauma right now, there is a very real chance that a lot of us are or will be at some point experiencing some form of post-traumatic stress disorder. Um, it can show up in very different ways and at very different times, um, and can be more extreme for some people. Maybe some people are kind of just like feeling their way through it. So, things like depression and anxiety and inability to sleep, insomnia, oversleeping, hypervigilance, um, feeling triggered or activated by different things, smells, sounds, um, people. I think that's a lot of it. Overeating, undereating, like different things that feel very different from how you normally operate, could be signs of PTSD. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be that label, but the fact that that all of us are experiencing trauma at varying levels, yeah, that is something to look out for. That can be something for you to look out for yourself, or for parents or caregivers to be thinking about when looking at the young people in their life. But along with that, I think having conversations around resilience is so, so, so important. Like we're going to get through this. Things will get better. Really focusing on being hopeful and the different things that are good and positive in their life. Like we've got something. There's got to be a thing, even if it's
Hmm.
like the sun came out today, or like I had a really good nap or something. I think really focusing on that, and thinking about the future is always a helpful tool, when you're kind of like stuck in these really, really, really difficult moments that don't feel like they're going to end. um, Everything like the bad things end, they have to end at some point. And so there is going to be a good thing on the other side, because there has to be. That's how time works. Like that's how things work. So like that's what I focus on, and that's what I like, the conversations that I like to have, because I think that they're helpful. I mean, it is important to acknowledge this, what we're all experiencing. Like I don't want to invalidate or minimize it in any way, but also we need to figure out how we can keep moving forward and how we can um, maintain our sanity and our mental health at the same time.
Yeah, and I think that just the various adaptations that we see in our culture already are even demonstrating that, like
Mhm.
very quickly we shifted to doing the things that we could do virtually over Zoom.
Right.
You know, we didn't know we'd need those skills, and now suddenly, you know, to a greater and lesser extent, and with bumps and with technology hurdles and accessibility problems, and like it's not, no, by no means am I being a Pollyanna about it, but we see how much we can adapt to things, and um, I really appreciate what you're talking about. I think that it's even been demonstrated neurologically that in recovering from trauma, one of the things that's difficult is to be able to practice the pathways of joy, you know, in our brains, and it sort of becomes a more repetitive and dark place in our minds, you know.
Right.
And we expect trauma, we expect negative things and negative outcomes, and so even just practicing, whether it's a gratitude list or which, if people haven't heard of it, it's just making a list of things you're grateful for. And the practice of making the list helps actually accentuate that way of thinking in your brain.
Right.
And actually helps counteract some of the PTSD, or, you know, build muscles in your
Exactly.
brain to, not
Exactly.
literally muscles, but, you know.
Yes. My favorite saying that I say all the time is fake it until you make it. Like, it's so cheesy,
We can
but
really use that right now.
it really, like, it is like your brain does create these paths, and you know, the more that you are saying affirmations to yourself, or making a gratitude list, or setting goals, or whatever it is, like that repetitive behavior becomes true eventually. Like, it may not feel true that first day, but eventually it does, and it can be really helpful.
It's almost like developing a habit. You're cultivating a habit of putting your attention on things that are more positive and hopeful, and also true. It's not like you're lying to yourself, but the
Right.
trauma makes us really stop seeing those brighter spots and makes us only think that the negative things are true. And that's not true.
Right.
At least, you know, often. Well, Ashleigh, I guess I just want to ask if there's anything you feel like, you know, it's a huge topic because there's so much happening, but is there anything that you want to leave us with that we haven't touched on already, or do you feel like we've kind of, I just don't want to end prematurely, if you have any other thoughts on all of this. It's been really lovely to hear your insights.
Yeah, I feel like this went by so quickly. I feel like we touched on everything that I really wanted to talk about. Just to further like say that young people really are the best. They're the best like population to work with. They are like so powerful and smart and strong and resilient. And I just really want to, you know, give a shout out to them, and like keep on keeping up, like just keep doing what you're doing, because you're making the world better, and like providing hope to the rest of us, and I hope to each other as a community. So yeah, I just kind of want to end on like that positive note. And yeah, like I think it's just really exciting, like the movement of things that are happening, and just like keep it going. Keep taking care of yourself so you can keep it going.
Love it. Thank you, Ashleigh.
Thank you.
That's it for today. Catch up on the episodes and extras from our first and second seasons. Subscribe to our HealMeToo podcast and festival YouTube channel, as well as Apple Podcasts. If you take just a second to give us a rating and review on iTunes, you can help more survivors and allies to find us. You can also join our mailing list at HealMeTooPodcast.com to hear about future festival pop-up events on Zoom, and follow us on social media. We are at HealMeTooFest, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Thank you for listening.